Okay, so in this next section, what we're going to be doing is taking some of our open chords that we've been learning how to play, and we're going to learn to get more creative with them, and we're going to start with the C chord, okay? Now, we've already learned a couple of different ways of playing C. We've talked about how we can play C, for instance, going from G down to C like this, which is technically called a C add 9, okay? But we also learned how to play the traditional C, which is like this. Well, that's the one we're going to be talking about right now. And the reason is, now, I guess before we get started, let me just make sure you understand this. You can learn to do some really wonderful and creative stuff on this instrument without having 6 years of piano and 9 years of music theory, okay? Now, again, I'm not saying that those things aren't important. They are very important to some people, okay? But what you do have is the ability of being able to use your ear when you play and decide if you think things sound good. You know, you take an artist like Bob Dylan, for instance. I don't know why I'm picking on Bob Dylan, but it's not like he, spent 15 years of do all this stuff before he ever decided to write a song. He just sat around and made stuff up and went, hey, I like this. And I want you to be able to have that same experience, okay? So as we talk about these, understand that when I was a kid and I was learning how to do what I'm going to show you right now, it isn't because I had all of this knowledge. It's because I wanted to explore the fretboard and the chords that I was learning and see what kinds of stuff I could come up with. So with this C chord, if you think about it, when I make this C, okay, the first thing that I notice is that I actually have an available finger. Like my pinky isn't doing anything. So then I started thinking, well, what if I took that pinky and I put it on the guitar, right? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take that pinky and we're going to place it on the first string on the 3rd fret. I'm going to get this really nice sound. Now, is it so different from this? No, but we can certainly hear that. And when we add that pinky on the first string here, we're not changing the integrity of this chord at all. It's still a C chord. It's just a different voicing of this C chord, okay? Now, if you do know anything about your theory, a C chord is comprised of C, E, and G, okay? And the note I'm adding on with my pinky is a G, so I'm not changing anything other than the voicing of this chord, okay? So it's still just a plain old C chord, just a different voicing. So what's kind of nice about that is I can take that new voicing and I could maybe move back and forth between the traditional C sound and something really amazing happens when I do that. When I was a kid and I was learning how to do this, the difference in sounds was always attributed to changing chords. If I was on C, if I wanted a difference in sound, I had to go to G or I had to go somewhere else. Well, now we don't even have to leave the chord that we're on. We can actually create melodic motifs, if you will, by staying on that same chord and just changing a note or two, which we'll talk about. So now all of a sudden I can keep this consistency of the C chord going and change something else about the voicing, and it sounds kind of cool. Okay, so I don't have to worry about just changing chords all the time and having 13 chords in my song. I could just create something very simple that went. Now think about that. Think about how many different things you might hear something in your head, like a melody in your head or something that could be happening with that. That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's look at some other things that we could do with C. Let's go ahead and take that pinky and let's move it up here. So now I'm on the 2nd string 3rd fret here. Okay. That sounds super cool. So what I'm doing is taking this C chord right here and I'm adding in the note D. Okay. Well, that should sound kind of familiar because we were doing it over here. And then we were actually adding in this note. So now you're noticing that this chord that we played before is actually just this chord using this and this right here at the same time. It's using both of those notes down on the bottom at the same time. Well, when we play it over on this side, I mean, I suppose I could try and kind of bar with my pinky there, but that would be a bit difficult. So, and I don't really want to. I want to keep those separate. So now I've got this So this chord would technically, with the pinky on, would technically be called a C add 9 as well. And see, now I've got the availability of going from the C add 9 sound, taking that pinky off, and it goes back to that C sound. Where when I was over here doing this C, I didn't have that note available over here because my fingers were all used up, you see? So there's lots of different reasons why you'd play chords in different ways to get exactly what we're doing right now. So now watch this. I could go from this C add 9 back to the C. And then how about this? So now all of a sudden, my palette of chord sounds or extensions keeps widening, right? I've got more things that I can do. But I never forget about all of these rhythm things I've talked about. You know, strumming in different sectors of the guitar, right? Strumming with dynamics, using dynamic contrast, all those things. I'm still very aware of that as I'm playing, because the bottom line is that the listener doesn't care if there's 7 different notes or 5 different notes. They're not thinking about that. They just want something that sounds interesting to them. And it's still my strum that's going to sell this sound, right? But if you think about it, all the action is happening down here on these thinner strings. So if my pick is bashing on the top strings here, I'm not going to hear all this wonderful stuff that's happening down on those thin strings. So you can see how these thinner strings become quite important, dare I say, more important than the rest of the chord, because that's where you're going to hear all of this uniqueness happening. Where if you're just strumming up here, you're not going to hear any of that, right? So I got to be aware of kind of strumming where the action is, so to speak, right? And those all sound really, really nice, okay? Now we're going to bring those into play a little bit later too with some other chords as we keep learning how to do this. But let's take the pinky and we're going to move it up another string. So now we're going to be on the 3rd string. Now this becomes really unusual. I shouldn't say unusual, but very, very specific in color. When we add on the pinky up here on the 3rd string, 3rd fret, we get what's called a C7 chord. And we hear this a lot in traditional music, folk music, Americana music. You know, I always think like church songs or, you know, holiday songs like Christmas songs or something. You're going to hear these sounds quite frequently. But we also hear it a lot in a style of music called the blues. So if you do like blues music, learning how to play 7th chords is really important, you know. You know, there's lots of cool stuff that we can do, and we'll get to some of that a little bit later. But okay, so now let's kind of bypass that, because you'll notice if I use that along with these, now again, I'm not you, so I don't know what I want for my sounds, but those sounds kind of clash a little bit because this one really is kind of a one-of-a-kind sound, where those other sounds, the 2nd string and the 1st string, are just kind of melodic sounds that I can add into this thing. They're fairly easy to use in just about any standard musical situation I find myself in. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take that pinky and I'm going to move it up again onto the 4th string, 3rd fret. Now this is a super cool one. This is what we call a C, and this note that we're adding in is called a sus4. Now that's kind of a weird thing to say, but sus4 just simply means the normal C that I'm playing. What I'm doing is this note right here is the note E, and we call it the 3rd of the chord. And again, don't get caught up in the theory if you don't know that. But what I'm doing is I'm suspending, that's what sus means. I'm suspending the sound of that regular C chord by adding in the 4th of the scale. Now again, don't let that weird you out. Just understand sus4, what that really means is that you're suspending the home sound, the sound that our ear is drawn to. When I do this, it wants to come back home, you see? That sounds really cool. Now, would I use all of those options at the same time like that? Probably not. That gets to be a little much. But I could explore some of those, and that's what I want you to do, is just explore those sounds a little bit. Okay? Now remember, if I'm doing this, and I go here, it's going to change the sound a little bit. Now again, that doesn't mean it's bad, but what I want you to avoid is, don't just think more is better, right? If I play all of these options, because I'm going to give you all kinds of different options coming up here. It's not that you need all of them. You just need to find something that really kind of resonates with the mood you're in and the way you're playing at the time, or maybe something that you're writing, and kind of go with that. And if you do a couple of them, it's okay. But you don't need to do everything that I show you all at once, because it just winds up being overkill. Okay? So that's what we're going to start off with, the C right now. And then when you're ready, I'm going to give you some other options here from this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, we're going to start taking fingers off in the next section.